Kwang is the man. That's it. That's all I've got for the intro. Just kidding, this deadly sword swinger has got butter all over his sword hilt, so it constantly flies from his hands. Luckily, this dude is made of lightning like Zeus and could call it back to him at any time, or just fly over to it instead. Kwang is the type of pick that makes you uneasy when you see him on your team. Not quite as bad as Kalari, but in the same notion. You aren't quite sure if this random person who just picked Kwang can handle what it takes to be effective on him. Today, we're going to cover some of the major aspects of Kwang that should leave you with a better understanding of how to handle the Kwang. First, let's go over his major strengths and weaknesses. It's always important to know where your character is going to struggle and where they're going to shine the most too. It's key to effective gameplay. First, for Kwang's strengths, he's a powerful split pusher, able to put high pressure on the lanes during late game. He can cause awesome initiations thanks to his sudden ulti teleport that does good damage, but mainly an impactful slow that will give your team an easier time landing their follow-up abilities. With that same teleport ulti, he can actually escape many terrible situations by simply throwing the sword and running away from it, leading the chasing enemies in the opposite direction. Once at a safe range from the sword, teleport to the sword, leaving your enemies behind and giving yourself an easy escape. If you're pushing your farm as hard as possible and don't think you need the ulti soon, you can always throw down your sword before you recall and then just ulti straight back into the lane and keep farming with literally no downtime. This can be extremely effective at the right times if you use it to split push. Overall, he's a very powerful solo lane character. Okay, so that covers it for his main strengths. What a good Kwang can really bring to the table when played right. Now for the hard truths. It's Kwang's weaknesses. First and foremost, he's not that relevant if he's played poorly. You have to really work to have similar impact as other heroes. It's super easy to dodge his snare, which makes it very hard to hit, and of course his ulti will become unreliable if you're struggling to hit your snare. One of his strengths is his split pushing power, which Kalari and Iggy are just two characters right off the bat who do it better than him. He's basically a harder Feng Mao. He's a very slow jungler, causing you to fall behind if you're forced to jungle, and he suffers greatly if he's not played in the best spot for him, which would be the solo lane. I'd rather have a Kwang in mid or in the duo lane than in jungle, but he's so much better when he's in the solo lane. Overall, Kwang requires more skill compared to most characters, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. A good player can make huge plays with Kwang and rarely die, make impactful split pushes, lock down Black, be great against Prime. It just takes more skill than most other characters. His ultimate can break or make a team fight when used correctly. It's all about knowing just when to do it, even if the main reason you do it is not actually for the damage, but to just help your team follow up with their own damage on a slow target. The thing is, it's just a lot easier to fill the same role by playing Feng Mao, but Kwang requires the right player to be effective. So now we've covered the main parts of what Kwang is, let's actually cover the build. I have a variety of builds. There are two styles that seem to work best though. Tanky support that shreds the armor of a target for your team, or a deck built to counter specific types of enemies with good damage while having the power to split push and take important objectives. First up is the tanky support deck. I'll start by explaining I normally do not run this deck, and it's only in rare situations that it's actually good. But here's why. The deck is built around shredding armor from specific targets, allowing your team to then kill them. Now, what happens when you're not with 4 people on voice calling out, "Ooh, I've shredded that guy"? Well, in the solo queue, or when you've got randoms on your team, these people can't hear you, so they're not going to attack the same target as you. You end up doing no damage and being irrelevant the whole game. So this is a deck for when you're playing in a pre-made team, who you're gonna communicate with. In solo queue, this deck is not a good idea because people will not work together. But in the case that you're actually working with your team, most likely when you're in your own group with your friends, this deck can be hilariously powerful. The pure damage you can allow your team to do, even on their tanky characters, is amazing. You can turn steel into dust by removing all of his armor, and then your carry can ream them. Now this build is pretty easy. You start with a health pot and 2 strike tokens, or a healer token and a health pot. It really depends on what you're against in your lane. For example, if you're against a melee fighter, you take the strike tokens. If you're against a ranged character, you take the healer token. It's going to give you sustain that you can not give a damn about that ranged, or the power to outlast hit the enemy fighter and also kill them. Early game cheap cards like this Lord's Ward, Amulet of the Veteran, and then your cheap barrier and plate will make you a pain in the ass to even attack. You'll be made out of fucking rot. You'll work in your Scourging Tails somewhere during this, and you'll use it to clip off the enemy's physical armor for your team to kill them. Late game, replace your cheap cards with the more expensive versions, lose the Scourging Tails and replace it with a Satori Cloak, which will then cause you to shred both physical and energy armor, not just physical. Anyone you shred will be very vulnerable and your team can easily kill them. This is a great deck when working with your team and terrible if you're not. Meanwhile, in the real world, you're probably going to want to solo queue or duo queue a lot of the time. You're going to need the right deck for that. We have two decks that you'll swap between depending on what you're facing. Let's say the enemy team are free energy based damage dealers, aka the majority. That's when you want the deck to counter that. The deck starts out the same. If you're against a fighter, go strike tokens. If you're against a range, go healer token. Then we're going to grab cheap items like the offensive maneuvers to help sustain in fights early game, grab a fountain spike to solve all mana issues that Kwang always faces, a cheap adamant edge for more health and damage, and the cheap tomb barrier to help counter those casters. Now let's say you're actually in the lane against a caster in the solo lane. Grab the cheap tomb barrier as fast as possible, your first item if you can. You'll blow their minds when they do like 1 damage per hit in the early game, and don't forget also, do buy your wards. We have the Void Steel Dagger to help us get through armor in the mid and late game. Thirst Fang is highly effective comboed with Kwang's passive. You'll sustain in fights extremely well thanks to the lifesteal of your passive and this item, and then you're going to get a Thunder Cleaver and a Windcarver Blade that should be your last 2 items. The attack speed is nice, don't get me wrong, but only when you've got everything else first, not to mention the power of split pushing you're going to gain when you finish that Thunder Cleaver. Also, there is a Scarab Clause in this deck. That's if you see a mural on the enemy team. You're going to pick this up in the mid game if you see a mural on the enemy team, and you're going to ruin her life if you do. But what if the enemy isn't mainly energy and casters, but actually physical fighters? Well, counter that instead with this deck. The Versus Fighters deck starts the same as the others. Strike tokens or the healer token, depending on what you're against. Then you grab offensive maneuvers, adamant edge, and your ward in the early game. At mid-game, the blood-soaked armor can really come into play. Barely anyone is building this item, so people aren't watching for it. Fun fact, if a melee fighter keeps punching you while you have this active, you're gonna fucking destroy them in the same way that toxic magic destroys people on Iggy. But what if you use it when you're killing Prime or Black buff? You'll melt it. Each time Prime punches you and you have this activated, it's going to bleed more and more and take so much more damage. It's a really undervalued card and something I love using. From there, the build ends the same. Void Steel Dagger, Thirst Fang, the Cleaver, and then the Windcarver Blade. Unless you see a mural, then you ruin her with the claws. All of these decks can jungle if you take the health pot and the strike tokens first, which is why they all have a Harvester's Key slotted in them. But that is the worst case scenario. Try not to go jungle on Kwang, guys. I'd like to quickly thank Blood Mortius for a great discussion that helped me form these top tier Kwang decks. As the owner of Team Carbon, a pro Paragon team, intense testing and discussion went into the creation of these decks, and then he shared their results with me. These are decks quite literally made by pros. You have to be very active with your decks, picking up cards based on what you're facing and making a thoughtful choice each time you actually go to buy. You won't be running the same build in the same order every game. It's going to be down to you to work out what it is you need to grab. In regards to ability priority, I grab Light of the Heavens first. Then at level 2, it's either Judgment of the Heavens or Gift of the Heavens, depending on if I'm in a lane or if I'm in jungle. Naturally, if I'm in jungle, then the lifesteal is going to be useful, or the potential to save your own life or land a kill at level 2 thanks to the snare is going to be great in lane, so it's going to depend where you are. Then at level 3, grab another level of Light, then it's either Judgment or Gift, based on what you didn't get at level 2. From here, you're going to grab your ultimate whenever you can, max out Light of the Heavens first, then Gift of the Heavens second, and only level Judgment when you have to. The reason for this order is simple. You want the damage and armor from Light as much as possible, then the lifesteal helps you survive in a fight or sustain in a lane, and the damage from Judgment isn't really worth leveling, so that's why it comes last. Your main goal is to have an impact on the game, because it's easy not to on Kwang. So you want to farm hard and think about every missed last hit. It should be highlighted in your head whenever you miss a last hit because you need to get that farm. So you remember, I missed that last hit. Next time I won't, and improve as you go. Now this is important on every character, right? You always want last hits, but you're going to be punished more if you fall behind on Kwang. So you need to get these last hits, and you need to get level 5 for your ultimate as soon as possible. So not backing before that point is always a good plan to have in your mind. The combo is very mana intensive, so not wasting your mana is important before you hit level level 5. You should be using your Light of the Heavens to give yourself armor when you're under attack. Just as you're about to be hit by an ultimate or an ability, pop on that armor and you'll reduce the damage you take massively. Or just use the ability to help you not miss last hits outside of going for kills. You might want to instantly murder someone by using the full combo the moment you hit level 5 for the surprise kill, because the raw damage is going to catch people off guard, but you'll need the mana for it, so you have to always be aware, can I use my combo or not, and not be running around too long if you can. Recall if you don't have the mana, because if you're not able to actually use your ultimate, what are you really bringing to the table in a fight? A bit of auto attack damage, maybe a short snare. It's not much. You need that ultimate. In the early game, you want to focus on farming as much as possible. As always, get as much CXP and hitting level 5 as fast as possible. At level 5, you can really shock people with your powerful ganks and quickly returning to your lane before it pushes into your tower. You're brilliant at picking up blue buff, red, and of course black from level 4, so try to lock these down during the game, even if it means giving red to your carry, blue to your caster, black to a ranged, just as long as you are controlling the buffs and making sure you and your team have them. It makes a big impact. And remember, you chomp white camps after level 4, so if your jungle isn't killing your side of the jungle, just pop in there and kill some white camps whenever viable. If there's any level 3 white camps, it's insane XP and CXP, and they're always worth grabbing because it's super easy for Kwang to kill them. Then in the mid game, it should be all about controlling black buff and your own buffs and using them at the right time to make a push or an attack that will result in a tower kill. An easy strategy is just to go over to the duo lane, pick up black buff, and then use it for a free man push on a tier 1 early game. But if you can kill a tier 1 by avoiding fighting and just killing the solo lane tower, that's fine too. You know, split pushing is good. But once you get that tier 1, it's a great idea to keep setting up slow pushes in the solo lane. Setting up a slow push is super easy. You just kill the ranged creep, run to the following wave that's on its way, and kill the ranged creep of that. Then run away, let your minions fight it out, and eventually your wave is going to amass into this big death ball and push the lane and fuck up some towers. If you're constantly setting these up while being effective and relevant elsewhere in the map, you're essentially being really good in your own lane because of these slow pushes and also being part of the key team fights. You can do this on any hero, but Kwang is great at it because he can global teleport if he wants to. Late game, it's going to be all about warding and controlling both Black and Prime. The moment Prime becomes vulnerable because they don't have wards on it, or maybe you've just picked off 1 or 2 of the enemy, go kill Prime. You're gonna really fuck it up, especially with the melee counter build. Blood-soaked armor can do huge damage against Prime when you constantly bleed it, and tanking Prime as Kwang is really effective because you have good lifesteal, similar to that of Chimera with his passive. If you can get 1 or 2 people to help you kill it, you can tank it for them, and taking Prime is really easy with Kwang. So if there's ever a moment where it's vulnerable, take it and use it to kill towers or take an inhib. Now in the team fights, your goal is obviously going to be shutting down the carries with that sick wombo combo once they've used their escapes or pushes. Then focus on peeling for your own carries. The thing that should be in your head when you're playing a Kwang in the middle of a team fight is, where's the enemy carry? Where's the enemy carry? If you can't see them and they're not part of the fight, then the next thing you should be thinking is, I've got to keep my carry alive. I've got to keep my carry alive. So you use your Q to peel as much as possible by snaring anyone who's attacking your carry, giving them more time to do damage. Physically block melee characters trying to kill your carry. It's all about doing things that make your team say, wow, good thing that Kwang was there. Because with your ultimate slow, with your snare, you can actually be a really great peeler similar to that of Bellica, providing more time for your ally to do the damage. But as soon as the enemy carry shows his face in a team fight, you go fucking murder him. It's really hard to get a Kwang off you. The burst damage with your ult combo can be really good, and if you've got good lifesteal with the builds that we're using, then you're going to be able to actually sustain and outbox these people. They can't kill you, and slowly you're going to kill them. Alright, that's a wide variety of advice and information on Kwang. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you learned something about Kwang, even if it's just what his weaknesses are, so you know how to fight an enemy Kwang. Best of luck in your own games. And if this video wasn't enough gameplay for you, I tried to follow these up with a gameplay focus guide video, so look out for that on Kwang on the channel soon. I'll see you guys next time. I'm gonna go hit some fools with this big sword. That sounded weird. Oh, and while I've got you, I'm streaming on Twitch a lot right now, playing tons of Paragon. We're currently doing the Dr. Kwang challenge, in which I focus on playing Murdoch or Kwang every game. And I've learned so much about both characters, and we've got some really fucking stellar gameplay. You can learn a lot from just watching these. If you were looking for like live commentary games, then this is a great place for you, because that's literally what they are. So as always, my Twitch is linked in the description. Come check it out. I hope to see you there. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.